On now to more news coming in. The Iran-US conflict is once again escalating, raising fears of a wider war in West Asia and threatening global energy supplies. Recent days have witnessed fresh military exchanges between Washington and Tehran. Despite earlier ceasefire efforts, the United States has carried out strikes on Iranian-linked targets and maritime assets, while Iran has accused Washington of violating understandings aimed at reducing tensions. The strategic Strait of Hormuz remains at the center of the confrontation. Iran has threatened restrictions on maritime traffic through the waterway, while the US has intensified military operations and enforcement actions in the Gulf region. The strait is one of the world's most critical energy corridors, carrying a significant share of global oil trade. Let's in fact quickly take a look at the proposed Iran-US memorandum of understanding and what all it contains. What are the main takeaways of this proposed MOU? Well, let's tell you now, according to Iranian media, these are the main takeaways and the highlights of this proposed memorandum of understanding. Now, first, an immediate and permanent ceasefire on all fronts, including in Lebanon. That is what this memorandum of understanding will include. Also, a US commitment will be there of not interfering in Iran's internal affairs. What are the other points that are going to be signed on the dotted line? Well, maritime blockade also lifted within 30 days. That is also something that will be agreed upon by both sides. Also, US forces to withdraw from areas around Iran. That is again something that will be pledged by the United States. The Strait of Hormuz also reopened within 30 days under Iranian arrangements. That is something that Iran will agree to. Suspension of sanctions on Iranian oil and on petrochemical exports as well. That is again something that will be in the deal. And full access to Iranian financial assets is something also that will be agreed to. 60 days of negotiations towards a final nuclear agreement will also be pledged. And $24 billion in frozen Iranian funds are to be released as well, with half before the talks begin on a final deal. Missile program and support for resistance groups excluded from negotiations. And final agreement to be endorsed by the United Nations, of course, Security Council. Meanwhile, what we're also learning is the draft is still pending, though, review and approval by Iranian authorities. It is close to finality, but it is still under review. Joining us at this point is Commodore D.S. Sodhi, a defense analyst. Commodore Sodhi, a deal is in the offing. We're close to an agreement. That's what sources now are indicating. And we've put out some of the contents as to what we believe will be in this agreement between both sides. What is your inference from these findings on this proposed Iran-US MOU?
Well, if you what you have spoken about the various points which have come in the MOU, it looks that there is a possibility that they may strike this deal. Iran and US may close the deal, but one has to look at is the two issues. One is the Hormuz blockade by US, as well as the Hormuz passage of the ships from through Hormuz, and the toll tax which Iran had spoken earlier. As also, so far as the nuclear program is concerned, you have said that they are going to take around 60 days more to talk about that. Now, that will again be a very critical point as to what is going to happen with regard to the nuclear program of Iran. Nothing, the clarity as of now is not there on that issue. Yes, we have seen that Mr. Trump, has made a statement saying that we are very close to closing the deal with Iran. That is why he did not carry out the retaliatory attacks on Iran. So under these circumstances, what one can say is that it looks that there is a possibility of some sort of a closure to the agreement between Iran and US. However, with regard to the major issues with regard to nuclear program as well as to Hormuz, maybe some discussions may still happen.
Absolutely. Commodore Sodhi, though, this is just something that, of course, is, inching now close to finality between both sides. Do you believe that is something that will happen within the next 24 to 48 hours, or are we still a few days away from this interim agreement? It's not a final one, of course. It will give both sides more time to conclude a final agreement, but it will also prolong the ceasefire, but it will be a major breakthrough if it happens. Do you expect this to be signed sometime in the next 24 to 48 hours, or are we still a few days away?
No, Uday, what we have to say is that there is a possibility of this sort of an interim agreement getting signed, maybe within 48 hours or within a week. You can see that as of now, the attacks which US had done on the, shipping, 2 ships were attacked where we lost 3 Indian seafarers, and early in the first one we had to evacuate 24 seafarers, which was done by the Indian Navy. Now, these 2 attacks which happened on the ships had put a lot of pressure on the United States. India had also taken up this issue by summoning the US diplomats in Delhi. Maybe because Mr. Trump would have realized that by carrying out attacks on Iranian military assets and on the shipping through Hormuz may not yield any result. So he would have thought that it's better to close an interim agreement. Maybe, to some extent, it may help both the countries, and maybe the whole of world may have a sigh of relief for some time. But what is more important to see is the basic 2 points which were there with regard to the nuclear program and the Hormuz, the toll tax which Iran had talked about. What happens to those 2 points? That's very important.
Right, stay with us. More breaking developments also coming in now this hour. A major diplomatic development has occurred amidst the growing tensions in the Gulf region. The Ministry of External Affairs has summoned US Charge d'Affaires Jason Meeks to formally lodge India's protest over a series of attacks on commercial vessels off the coast of Oman. The move comes after yet another merchant vessel carrying 20 Indian crew members on board came under attack yesterday. The US envoy was called in by the additional secretary handling Americas in the MEA, marking the second time that the US mission has been summoned over the issue. So once again, the US Charge d'Affaires summoned by the MEA. Commodore Sodi, what do you make of this big development?
Yes, so there you see India has made their point by calling them and issuing a warning to them, because the attacks which happened on the ships, those ships were manned by the Indian crew, and we have seen that we lost 3 seafarers in the second attack. In the first attack, those people were lucky that they were rescued by the Indian Navy. Now, presently, under the circumstances, because, Iran had also issued a warning saying that Iran is going to stop the flow of, this passage of the ships through Hormuz. That was threatening not only to US, but it was for the whole world is what would have suffered. And India too would have, got troubled by this decision which Iran would have taken. But now, seeing to it that yes, there is some sort of a, the US has been very moderate sort of statements coming from the US, and making the statements that we are inching towards closing this sort of agreement. So that is a good development which is happening. But yes, India had to lodge their resentment, and India has done that. That is
absolutely. Commodore Sodi, thank you for joining us with your perspective on this big story. More news coming in now. AICC President Mallikarjun Kharge has been declared elected